I've been a hardcore Windows user for the last 25 years. I've started using Windows when you had to use floppy disks to install it. 10 of those. And last week I've bought a Mac. For the first time, I've never used a Mac before. I've never had one in my hand before, and I've never had the desire to work on a Mac because my Windows devices always were quite capable of whatever I've thrown at them. However, recently with the purchase of the A7 IV and the 10-bit 422 4K60, my trusted and beloved Asus Zephyrus Rock G14 came to its limit. So basically every time I had to edit a 4K60 clip in 10-bit 422, my device would almost die of a heat stroke. The acoustics were quite annoying because it was like sitting on top of a jet engine. And the performance was underwhelming, to say the least. So I've decided to give Mac a try, because basically the Mac was cheaper than the newer model of my G14. I'm having the G14 from late of 2020, and now I got the MacBook M1 Pro 14-inch base model. And I thought I'd give some insights into how it feels using a Mac as a Windows user, because there's always this debate, Mac versus Windows. And in my opinion, it isn't about Mac versus Windows. They are both tools. And as long as you know what tool you need in order to get the job done, either is perfect. In my case, I'm heavily working on video editing, photo editing, and some text documents. Therefore, the new M1 chip, or the M1 Pro chip, was quite interesting to me, which made me jump for the MacBook in the first place. And being cheaper than the new Asus was another thing. So let's dive into the pros and cons from the perspective of a Windows user on which device actually is better. Spoiler alert, neither. But let's dive in. First, let me quickly go over some things that I really couldn't care less about. Looks. I don't sit in a cafe showing off my Mac and caressing it while I sip on my iced latte. Feel. My Asus is basically made of the same material as the MacBook, so they pretty much, to the touch of my hands, feel identical. In fact, the Mac has some sharper edges than the Asus, which is kind of odd. The overall aesthetics of the Mac don't bother me. I don't care about them. It's a tool for me, as I mentioned before, and I'm sitting on my desk and typing and editing on it. So I don't care how it looks. The OS. A few years ago I would have said that the OS is the biggest difference between Mac and Windows. But since I'm using Windows 11 on my Asus, and from 10 to 11 there was quite a big jump in design choices. So Windows 11 pretty much looks like Mac, basically. So no biggie there. And since all my services besides DaVinci and the Adobe Suite are cloud-based, I couldn't care less what operating system I'm working on. I prefer Linux, Fedora, to work actually, but you can't run Adobe and you can't run DaVinci on Linux. Port selection. Now, in the past, ports on the Mac were always an issue. You basically had to carry around a gazillion dongles to make it work. Now with the 14-inch MacBook Pro, there is no really need for dongles anymore. You got 3 Thunderbolt 3, I think, USB-C type ports. You got a full-size HDMI port, you got an SD card reader, you got a microphone, headphone jack. So basically you're all set. The only thing I'm missing, which my Asus has, is a standard USB-A port, because, well, basically most of my USB types for sticks and my mouse, they are run on USB-A. But there's an easy fix. I've just bought the tiniest of adapters and now they work perfect with my MacBook. And that's about it. This is the stuff I don't care about or I'm indifferent about because it doesn't affect my workflow. And since it doesn't affect my workflow, I don't care. I couldn't care less, in fact, about these points. So let's move on to things I actually really like about the Mac as a Windows user. The power of the device. I'm pretty sure the latest Asus has the same capabilities of editing video, but the M1 Pro really cuts through my 4K 64-bit, 10-bit 422 like a hot knife through butter. There's not a stutter, nothing. I've edited a reel on Friday and it had 16 4K clips stacked on top of each other, 4 at a time, and it didn't even stutter. So basically whatever I've thrown at it up until to this point, it worked through quite easily, so there was no issue. The actual screen of the device. My Asus is a 14-inch as well, but the screen on the Mac just is a bit bigger. It looks brighter, it looks more contrasty, and overall it's a better screen. Especially if you color grade and edit photos, the better the screen, the better the final product. So I'm quite pleased with that. And I don't know why, but for some reason, whenever I'm taking a video off the screen with the camera, it looks yellowish. So it doesn't, if you look at it with your bare eye, the screen is absolutely fantastic. The touchpad. Huge touchpad with a nice glass finish that's silky smooth, and I actually prefer working with a touchpad instead of the mouse because I don't always have to replace my mouse in order to get something done. So that's a big plus for the Mac as well. Lastly, things that I like, the battery life. I'm basically running 2 days of normal use, like office work, of one charge. And the best I could hope for with my Asus was about 4 to 5 hours of normal usage. Even though the AMD processor that was in it, or is in it, is quite energy sufficient. Efficient, not sufficient, efficient. But for some reason, Windows devices always struggle with battery life, unless they are these old Ultrabooks that basically can do nothing but browse the web. And another thing that I really like about the Mac is that I get full power every time. Whether I'm plugged in to a socket or if I'm running it off of the battery, I always get full power. On my Asus, I always go into power saving mode the second I'm unplugged, which makes video editing without the device being plugged in quite hard because you basically lack all the power you need to properly edit the video. Now on to things that I don't like and that really frustrated me at the beginning. And the biggest, by far, the biggest thing that made me return it almost was that the Command Q on a Mac is set to close a window. Whereas on a PC or a Windows device, Command Q or Alt Q is the add symbol for writing out an email. You wouldn't believe me if I told you that I've closed the window where I was actually writing an email about 100 times in the last 7 days. It's so frustrating. After 25 years of using Windows, my muscle memory is just set to this motion of Alt Q to type in the add symbol. And no matter how hard I try to concentrate, muscle memory is faster. So every time I'm writing an email, I'm tipping along and click, I've closed the window. Because sometimes I write the email out and then I, well, basically put in the email at last. So that really grinds my gears. The Finder is an issue of its own. After using the Explorer for so long, the Finder is just inferior. In every aspect, the Finder is inferior. The way it looks, the way it works, the way the layout is put out. Basically, unless you add functions with third-party apps, the Finder on a Mac is far inferior to those on the Explorer on a Windows device. Basically, period. In order to make it properly work, I had to install, I can't remember the name, some third-party app that let me customize the way the Finder works with showing an indicator where you are on in which folder where you are, the file sizes and so forth. And why can't you see the data rate when you're transferring files? If I'm transferring files from one part of the computer to an SD or from an SD to an SSD, or no matter where I transfer files, I can't see how fast the files are transferring. Why is no Apple user concerned about the transfer speeds? Apparently you all think that, well, it's an Apple, it's the fastest you can get. It's not. My Asus device actually is faster transferring files than this new M1 Pro Mac. The thing is that I can't even tell how slow or how fast it is because it doesn't show. And apparently no one's concerned about this not being shown. It's just a given. Well, we don't need that. Scratch that. Why? The keyboard. I really don't like the keyboard. It's a clickety-clackety keyboard and it feels cheap. And plasticky, and typing on it isn't fun. I really like the keyboard on my Asus. Not as good as the keyboards on a Lenovo device, which I've used in the past a lot, but quite close. And the Apple keyboard, it's sitting right here, the Apple keyboard is the worst keyboard I've used so far on a Windows machine comparison to Mac. Maybe there are other Macs that have a better keyboard, but this keyboard isn't mine. I don't really like it. Oh, and the spacebar clap on the Asus is just because I've hammered down on it for 2 years now, so it's starting to age. The good old dock and status bar. Why? You have a 16:9 aspect ratio, or 20:9, or whatever the aspect ratio on the Mac is. And for some reason, the designers, which claim to be the best designers in the world for user interfaces, decided that it's a smart idea to take space off the bottom and take space off the top. On a Windows device, you got your status bar and your dock basically on the bottom. So you don't waste that much real estate on top. And the same with all this, the windows or the settings bar on top. Why? And if I maximize the window, it either maximizes it completely and basically overrides the status bar, or it's some sort of in between. And sometimes it doesn't work. If you double tap on basically the window top bar, it's supposed to expand to full size. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If you do this with the Finder, it basically just shrinks and expands and shrinks and expands. And I don't know why. Why is it the same action, doing the same thing in every window? Why This is like madness. Why is the same action doing different stuff on different windows? Not Windows operating system, but few windows. I don't get it. I'm never sure whether I'm double tapping it, it will expand, or will it shrink, or will it just expand a bit, or will it go full screen or full size? There's no logic to that. And I can't understand why. Copy and paste. A command or a shortcut I really use a lot. Basically 200 times a day. And on a Windows, Alt-C or Control-C, Control-V. Perfect. The spacing between my indicator and my pinky is just the right amount of space that is comfortable to copy and paste. It's quick, it's easy, perfect. On a Mac, was a Mac designed for midgets. It's like my hand needs to be this tiny in order for me to be able to click it properly, because the command button is so close to the C that you basically have to use your thumb and your index to do it. Why? It's so close that you. But well, these are my complaints with the Mac. And to be honest, I don't know if I will stick to Mac. And I don't know if I will go back to Windows. For now, I'm using a Mac, and I will use it exclusively because I always only use one device and I don't switch between them. There's no point, in my opinion. I'm not a review channel for Mac and Windows. These are just my thoughts on it. Maybe they help you or not. But in the end, it comes down to what I've said at the beginning. Mac and Windows are tools. They are no style choices. They are no statement, even though Apple wants you to believe that Mac or Apple products are lifestyle products. They aren't. That's one of the biggest marketing scams in history, to convince people that Apple is a lifestyle product. Think. It's a tool to get a job done. If you're editing videos, if you're editing photos, if you're doing anything creative, use a Mac. That's what they are known for, that's what they're good at. Go for it. If you're using it basically for productivity, rendering 3D models that are highly graphic card intense, or that need huge graphic memory and so forth, go with a Windows machine with a dedicated graphics card. That's it. It's a tool. Don't bigger about Mac versus PC and Windows versus Mac. It's like arguing about camera brands. They are tools, and the Canon is better in one place, where the Sony is better in another. Then comes Olympus and Fuji. They all have their place. Micro Four Thirds, full frame, APS-C, they all have their place for a specific task. They are tools. Just like a hammer or a screwdriver, they are tools. Use them as such and stop arguing about With that being said, have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.